You know that moment at the end of the month when you check your bank balance and for about 2 seconds you think, hey, this actually isn't that bad. And then, like clockwork, your memory decides to play you a highlight reel of all the random stuff you forgot you bought. That $7 cold brew habit that felt like self care, the late night delivery that was supposed to be a one off, and those limited time deals you fell victim to twice. And suddenly you're just sort of staring at the screen doing quick mental math, realizing the numbers are smaller than you thought, and honestly, maybe a little scared because, well, it was supposed to last longer. I think we all hate that feeling, and it's not even about the exact amount. It's that slow, dawning sense that small mistakes, tiny choices, end up compounding into something much bigger, like way bigger than you ever intended. It's rarely a single bad decision that tanks your month. It's just this weird accumulation of ordinary stuff. At least that's the excuse I give myself. Not that it helps, but sometimes you just need to play along with your inner rationalizer for a minute, right? Honestly, that moment, that sense of how did I get here is basically how I ended up obsessed with money. Not just the numbers, but the why. The way people behave, the little stories we tell ourselves, the justifications, the patterns, good and bad. I find myself reading way too much about things like financial disasters and how sometimes the biggest messes and the craziest consequences start not with a bang, but with something so insignificant, so normal, that most people missed it entirely. For what it's worth, my friends are probably tired of hearing me retell these stories, but I can't help it. I guess it's now just what I do. Not that I'm immune to my own small mistakes that snowball problem. Looking at you, overpriced gym membership from 2018, but if I've learned one thing obsessing over money and why we make the financial decisions we do, it's this. What looks tiny at first can explode, and not just mess up your checking account, but in the right or wrong environment, shake up the entire world. And honestly, the wild part isn't that it happens. It's that it keeps happening, like over and over with new cast members each time, but the exact same script. Stick with me here because today I want to show you how a small market crash, something people barely noticed at first, turned into a global disaster that swallowed savings, jobs, even whole countries' futures. Not just as a history lesson, but as a, well, maybe a wake up call? Or at least a different way of looking at risk, stability, and all the invisible threads tying us together. Because honestly, if you've ever found yourself underestimating a little problem in your own life, you might be a lot closer to this story than you think. Let's get into it, right? I mean, what does it actually look like when a small market crash becomes, well, everyone's nightmare? Sort of like that one friend who swears they're leaving early, and then 3 hours and multiple tequila shots later, they're dancing on the bar and you're Googling best hangover cures. Nobody intended for the night to end in chaos, but here we are. Same energy with market crashes. Section 1. The Unnoticed Domino. Let's rewind to the late 1990s in Thailand. Now, Thailand's a place most people think about in terms of dreamy beaches, spicy street food, and, okay, maybe a backpacker gap year story or two. But back then, it was the backdrop for a financial party that felt like it would never end. The weird thing was, almost nobody saw anything wrong at first. Foreign investors were shoving cash into Thailand's markets, money was cheap, and property values soared. It was like every get-rich trope on TikTok, except in real estate and at national scale. The government had even pegged the Thai baht to the US dollar and on. Paper stability was guaranteed. Except you ever try propping up a wobbly table by shoving a napkin under one leg? Looks fine, works for a while, until someone stumbles into it and the whole thing collapses, plates, drinks, glass and all. That was the Thai currency peg. From the outside, it was steady, but underneath, massive debts were piling up, propped up by borrowed dollars, shaky confidence, and a gnawing sense of, is this really as solid as it looks? You guessed it. One day, that metaphorical elbow hit the table. Capital started sneaking out. It wasn't a stampede. Yet. But international investors smelled something off bad loans, ballooning deficits, and the whispers began. Why does this matter? Because every system is more fragile than it looks on the surface. In your own life, that might mean a budget balanced on one more good month. In Thailand, It was a national economy. Advice? Check the legs of your own table. Surface stability hides all sorts of mess underneath. Section 2. The first crack. Picture it. International investors, like a flock of pigeons who heard a far-off car door slam, all leap into the air at once. Money leaves. Thailand tries to defend its currency, burns through reserves, but gravity is a law you can't negotiate. On July 2nd, 1997, Thailand gives up the fight and lets the baht float. Prices drop like elevator cables. Buildings half finished dot the skyline. Jobs vanish. I swear, if you could hear an economy scream, this is probably what it would sound like. Maybe you're thinking, okay, so a small country's currency gets pummeled. Why does a young couple in, I don't know, Paris or Sydney care? Well, it's like hearing about a faraway earthquake and ignoring it until the aftershocks run right under your own house. The minute investors realize stability is a mirage in one place, they turn their binoculars everywhere. Malaysia, Indonesia, South Korea. If you've got money parked in emerging markets, we're safe now. The crack becomes a chasm. Money stampedes out of Asia, stocks tumble, currencies collapse one by one. People used to joke about contagion before 2020, but honestly, no mask was going to stop this spread. Why does it matter? Because fear is as viral as hope. Maybe more so. And in markets, panic doesn't politely wait its turn. Takeaway: if you sense panic coming, don't waste time guessing if it'll stop after the first domino. Plan for aftershocks. Section 3. The global web gets tangled. Quick aside, I remember watching the news as a teenager, seeing bored-looking anchors talk about something happening in Asia, and not grasping why my dad was suddenly so jumpy about his retirement account. I figured surely he's overreacting. Turns out he was just one link in a long, invisible web. And the spider was stirring. Banks in London, mutual funds in New York, pension money in Tokyo. All of it had tentacles stretching back into Asia. When the currencies crashed, so did the value of investments. Overseas. It's a weird mess of dominoes hitting dominoes across oceans. Suddenly, the little crash in Thailand is tanking shares in Frankfurt, causing layoffs in Detroit, wiping out savings everywhere. Maybe it's excessive to compare modern finance to some kind of cosmic Rube Goldberg machine, but honestly, sometimes it feels that way. Everything's linked, but nobody designed it to be robust, just profitable. And when the crash came, nobody even knew where the mess would pop up next. Advice? Know your connections. Financial, emotional, even digital. When one part gets hit, shocks travel. Often where you'd least expect. Section 4. The human cost, told in small stories. Let's slow down for a second because it's really easy to lose the thread in all these numbers. Imagine being a small business owner in Indonesia in 1998. You ran a little shop, a bakery maybe, or a stall at the market. Your inventory goes up in price overnight. Customers vanish, but your debts denominated in dollars, not local currency, are now twice as big. You didn't make any international trades, no foreign investments, but now you're on the brink. Or imagine you're a student in South Korea, graduating just as companies cut back on hiring. You did everything right. A degree, part-time jobs, extra language classes. And now job prospects evaporate for reasons you don't even understand. Why talk about this? Because crisis is just a word until it lands on your doorstep. Every chart or news report is 100,000 people trying to figure out dinner, rent, tuition. Takeaway: don't let distance, geographic or emotional, make you underestimate risk. If something feels far away, remember, you're only a few links away from somebody in the blast zone. Section 5. Financial firefighters. Or sometimes water makes the damage worse. When the panic spread, global organizations stepped in. The IMF arrived with big, flashy rescue packages loans with tough conditions. Tighten your belts, budgets, open up your markets. Some countries felt like they were trading one disaster for another. I mean, imagine if your doctor showed up, diagnosed you with a cold, and then prescribed a complete lifestyle overhaul on top of antibiotics. Sure, you might get better, but you're not exactly going to be thrilled, right? In a lot of places, austerity hurt more than it helped, at least at first. Unemployment shot up, public services were slashed, and protest lines got longer than bread lines. Economies didn't bounce back. They limped, bruised, sometimes angry enough to turn resentment into something much bigger. Simple breakdown. Rescues are never free, and even logical solutions can have side effects that last for decades. Personal reflection? I get it. Sometimes you need the tough medicine, but wow, sometimes the doctor could use a refresher course in bedside manner. Advice. When you're offered a fix, look closely at the price tag. Help can sometimes dig a deeper hole. Section Ayur 6. Contagion. Hits Hollywood, Russia, and the West get involved. By 1998, the crash had migrated. Russia's ruble collapsed, Argentina stared down its own disaster, and suddenly Wall Street wasn't laughing. A fancy hedge fund, long-term capital management, run by Nobel laureates, almost blew up the entire global financial system in a matter of weeks. How? They'd bet that markets were predictable, that turmoil over there had limits, and they used insane leverage. Picture betting your house and your neighbor's car on a hand of blackjack because the model said it was safe. It wasn't. Only a coordinated bailout by the biggest banks, and the Federal Reserve prevented a total meltdown. The scary part? All of this began with what lots of people called a manageable situation in Asia a year before. Why does this matter? Because risk doesn't stay in one lane, and the fancier the players think they are, the crazier the stakes, especially when nobody's truly in control. Actionable takeaway. Never trust someone who says, with our system, that could never happen here. The universe loves proving that wrong. Section 7. What global disaster really means. It's easy to talk scale. $2 trillion lost, millions in poverty, entire governments toppled. But honestly, the real story is how the effects echoed for years. Asian economies had to completely rethink their policies. Currencies changed. New regulations and a few dictators sprang up. People got more skeptical about the benefits of global markets. Politicians started using the word decoupling before it became trendy. Companies shifted supply chains. Consumers in America suddenly saw cheaper electronics because, hey, now Asian exports were bargains, while workers in Asia had to work twice as hard for half the pay. If you want to blame the start of globalization's dark side on something, this is one of the pivotal moments. Why does this matter? Because after a disaster, the rebuilding often changes more than the destruction did. Humorous aside, if anyone says nobody could have seen this coming, they either weren't paying attention or they're trying to hide the fact that they were the ones shaking the table in the first place. Section 8. We're all in the same boat. No, really. There's this cheesy old saying that when a storm comes, we're all in the same boat. But sometimes it feels more like we're in a fleet of rickety life rafts tied together with dental floss. One leaks and suddenly everyone's bailing water. Modern global finance isn't an island anymore, never was, really. Your pension in Chicago is connected to debt in Jakarta. The factory that used to employ your neighbor might move, might double its prices, might fold entirely, all because someone, somewhere got nervous. Metaphor. If the old world economy was like a village marketplace, everyone knew who owed what. Today's economy is an airport. Crowded, confusing, and with everyone convinced they're late for a flight. Actionable advice. Stay curious. Stay humble. Don't assume today's calm will last, but don't let that paralyze you either. Section 9. Patterns repeat 2008, crypto, and everything in between. If you look for it, you'll see this cycle repeating. In 2008, it was the U.S. housing market, a few missed subprime mortgage payments, some overly clever financial products, and then, well, you basically get a financial nuke that melts down the world's biggest economy and everyone else with it. Or, recent crypto meltdowns. One stable coin loses its peg and suddenly billions are wiped out, hedge funds evaporate, and ordinary people lose life savings. It all started with an isolated event. Every crisis is isolated until someone checks the map. Personal reflection? I remember in 2008 getting a call from a friend, usually a confident, relaxed guy, asking, should I pull all my money out of the bank? I didn't have an answer. Nobody did. Takeaway. When things seem too stable, look for the fault lines, especially if everyone else is pretending they don't exist. Section 10. How to not be the last to leave. Let's bring it back to our own lives, yeah? Most of us don't control billions, but we do control how prepared we are for surprises. My approach? Keep a bit of cash on hand, never assume the job or the paycheck is forever, and try not to rationalize little risks that just feel wrong because everyone else is ignoring them. As the legendary investor Charlie Munger says, it's not greed that drives the world, but envy. Sometimes it feels way more comfortable to go along with the crowd, but crowds can be reckless, especially when it comes to money. Bit of humor here. If your financial plan only works as long as nothing goes wrong, it's less of a plan and more of a wish. Advice: build for resilience, not perfection. The world always has more surprises than you do plans. Section 11: why we fall for it, hope, denial, and repeat. Here's the kicker. Even after all this, people will keep convincing themselves that this time is different. It's almost an ancient story: optimism, denial, and then panic. Whether it's a government promising permanent prosperity or an investor doubling down after losses, the urge to believe is strong. Little digression: my own family, we weren't immune. My parents took out a home equity loan right before the 2008 crash because housing never goes down. Guess what our dinner conversation was for, I don't know, 2 straight years after? Why does this matter? Because self-delusion is universal and fear, not logic, drives the bus during a crisis. Advice: take a breath. Reality is your friend, even when it's uncomfortable. Section 12: the hard truth about small crashes. The ugly secret? There's no such thing as a truly small crash anymore. Not with interconnected markets, fast-moving information, and economies that are about as stable as your average wobbly chair. Whether it's Thailand in '97, Wall Street in 2008, or a crypto platform today, what matters isn't just the first crack, it's how quickly and how far it spreads. Your action? Don't overreact, but don't ignore gut feelings either. When everyone says don't worry, that's when you should pay closest attention. All right, so if you're still here, thanks for sticking with me on this journey from a tiny financial hiccup in an overlooked corner of the world, all the way to the global crisis party no one wanted an invite to. If it feels overwhelming, well, honestly, it kind of is. These disasters remind us that even the best laid plans are vulnerable, that what looks sturdy can have invisible cracks, and that the difference between a small mess and a catastrophe is often just a handful of decisions nobody sees coming. But if there's a silver lining, and I really think there is, it's that understanding how the little stuff adds up gives you a weird kind of power. You see how cycles repeat, you see how denial and hope, how can turn a fixable problem into a runaway train. And you see how you, in your own little life, can step off the tracks before things go off the rails. Maybe you'll approach risk with a little more skepticism. Maybe you'll build a better emergency fund, ask smarter questions, or just resist the urge to let small problems slide for too long. Maybe you'll recognize the echoes of past disasters when everyone else is still celebrating. And hey, if nothing else, maybe I've convinced you that money, for all its charts and jargon, is just another way we play out the same old human story. Hope, fear, faith, panic, and the occasional comeback. That story belongs to all of us. The trick is remembering you're not just an audience member. You get to write your ending. So keep your eyes open, listen for the cracks. Don't be afraid to take your own path, even if it feels boring. And the next time you're tempted to ignore that tiny uh-oh in your gut, financial or otherwise, remember, sometimes that's the only warning you'll ever get. Here's to smoother tables, fewer nasty surprises, and a little more resilience for all of us. Take care, and I'll catch you in the next conversation.